Anime Fan Podcast. My name is Matt, and joining me today is a very special guest, Matt.
Hey there.
Hey, so today we are going to be reviewing the recent sports anime sensation, Yuri on Ice.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
so, Matt, just if you wouldn't mind, go into a little bit of your own expectations that we were kind of going into with this show.
Well, again, it was a new title, and we didn't know the source material, so my expectations were based just purely on the promotional material, the promotional video. So realistically, my expectation was that Yuri was going to be paired off with this other skater named Yuri, and it was going to be a very sort of it was going to be focused on shipping. It was going to just uh, honestly, at the beginning, I was worried it was just going to involve a huge cast of characters who were all fitting into like some kind of fetish, and it wasn't really going to focus on ice skating very much.
Right.
Obviously, a lot of that proved false.
Yes, that is correct. Some of that did prove true. You were half right about the shipping focus, of course.
Sure.
But yeah, I remember I was really negative because coming off the summer season, we had just gotten done watching Cheer Boys, and I was not into that. And I was just expecting another disappointment like Cheer Boys.
Hmm.
It turned out to be a much more interesting show than I thought it was going to be.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I was very pleasantly surprised by this show. So just to kind of give a quick summary here, the show takes place, or it starts off in with Yuri having just lost his or not his first competition, but he had lost some sort of global competition. He failed to make the qualifiers for the big ice skating competition referred to as the Grand Prix.
Well, he was in the Grand Prix, but he just got sixth place.
Oh, okay. So so he just totally failed in the Grand Prix that year.
Hmm.
And what happened was everybody was seeing him as being on the downswing. They were just seeing him as being just this other skater whose time had come and gone. He had gone back home, and while he was back at home, he ends up seeing a childhood friend of his who, and because he kind of had a little bit of a thing for her, he was kind of trying to impress her a little bit, I think, and he started performing this routine that his idol Victor, who was this grand champion of figure skating, like this, who had won 5 Grand Prix in the past, he had won the gold, and he had performed this routine that Victor had been known for in his youth, and he performed it completely flawlessly. Now, as it turns out, this girl he was seeing actually had daughters already, so she was already with somebody, and they had recorded this routine and posted it on YouTube. The video goes viral, and it just so happens that Victor managed to watch him do this routine. Victor comes to train him, and then from there they vow for Yuri under Victor's tutelage to win the gold at the next Grand Prix.
Right. Yeah, and so the story basically just follows Yuri with his initial training and then going through the requisite tournaments in order to go to the Grand Prix, and
Yes,
the season ends with him at the Grand Prix itself.
correct. And one of the if you have ever seen or looked up anything about Yuri on Ice, you may not even realize it's a sports story.
Hmm.
Because one of the big themes in the show comes with the sexual identity of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically, Matt had mentioned that he had thought that it was going to be Yuri and the other Yuri who get paired up. No, it is all about Yuri and Victor.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes down to their relationship and their dynamic as coach and trainer. And it seems as if though the the director of the series was aware of a lot of the tropes that come with sports series, specifically about a lot of the boys love undertones of the series.
Yeah, I mean, it was clearly well versed in how sports series are supposed to work, but it also, I mean, the big difference coming in, we had a feeling that this was going to be about shipping characters and providing bait, for people to decide on pairings.
Right.
Um,
Kind of like we were kind of expecting it to be try and write off the free phenomenon.
Yeah, exactly. I have a lot of attractive boys with devoted relationships to one another, and you can interpret them however you want. Um, to the show's credit, it actually did a lot more than that.
Right.
And the big draw, I think, that made this such a special show and such a phenomenon was that it actually explored in a lot of metaphorical language, but still very clear and undeniable nonetheless. Um, the journey, as it were, of Yuri discovering his sexuality and discovering his sexual attraction for Victor specifically, and
Right.
them creating a relationship together, uh, which was never, well, and I'm sure we'll talk about this. I'm sure, while it was never acknowledged in those exact terms by the show,
Right.
it was very clearly and undeniably implied that
Right.
their relationship was both professional and romantic, at least on
Yes.
some level.
Yes. And that's kind of one of the really interesting parts of the show is that the way it treats this central couple is that it's very normalized within the world.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's one of the major appeals of the show is that there are a few scenes that I remember, like for example when Yuri is giving an interview and Victor's kind of nudging him from the background. It's like, hey, weren't we gonna go out and get some food after this? Like, yeah, just hurry up. There was something that was very like there was something about that conversation that stuck out in my mind as two people who have spent a lot of time together, who have gotten very emotionally invested in one another, and just have this very natural flow to their conversations.
Mm.
Just as something as simple as just like, hey, wrap it up. We gotta go meet the so and so at the restaurant soon.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and one of the ways that the series chooses to explore this is through its routines, its figure skating routines. Uh, for example, one of the big themes in the show is actually how Yuri is using uh, these competitions to try and express himself, and how much he's grown to love Victor. And one of the issues that comes from that is that there's sort of this tension between Yuri's idolization of Victor and how Victor was the one who had originally inspired Yuri to take up figure skating, without even, knowing him. He was just this idol that Yuri had grown to know,
Yeah,
and now he was having to come to terms with the fact of meeting the real person.
yeah.
And he tries to proclaim his love to Victor in the rink. And I think one of the major issues or one of the major recurring themes that comes from his routines is being unable to separate his basically his idolization of Victor versus actually getting to know him as a person.
Hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
it was one of the issues that went semi addressed throughout the show was that it felt like their relationship, such as it was always kind of unbalanced.
right,
It always felt like Victor was someone that Yuri looked up to, and I don't know. On some level, it felt like Yuri was someone that Victor condescended to.
right,
Ultimately, the series like that's how it felt a lot of the run. It redeemed itself a bit when at episode 10 when they reveal that one time when Yuri was drunk a year earlier, he hit on Victor, and Victor was actually like really blown away by his style, and he thought Yuri was really interesting and wanted to get to know him more and was really
right,
intrigued by him. You get to see that, but I mean, and that's good. And I'm glad they did that. And it's probably okay that they, hold off on some stuff to reveal later. But one of the recurring issues with this show is that it gives you about 60 seconds of material to contradict or add nuance to several episodes worth of establishment.
Right. And that's I appreciate it when shows give you just enough information to infer what's going on. The problem is that this series moves so fast and spends so much time trying to convey so much through these figure skating competitions that they forget to actually give us the actual history and backstory on a lot of these characters that show up.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these characters who are not actually even all that important. I think a big one for me would be Georgie, the Russian skater who dances to win back his girlfriend.
Yeah.
Well, not even so much win back, but to express his intense loathing and pain that he feels for her now that she's gone, and just his he wants to prove to the world that love is meaningless.
Yeah.
And it's like I remember even watching at the time. It's like, oh, this guy's a great villain. I love him, and he just sort of disappears.
Yeah.
And it's like, and the series spent all of this time building up Georgie, and we have to watch all of his routines, and then he disappears, and it's like he wasn't even in the series.
Well, that's the thing is that there's I guess four main tournaments that it shows. It has
Right.
the the Japanese national tournament, and it really only builds up one additional character there. But after that, it has the Cup of China, and then the Rostelecom Cup in Russia, and the Grand Prix finale in Spain. And for all those tournaments, it has to build up a narrative for every participant. Um,
Right.
and it gets so busy on all the secondary characters, and it's not negative, like a lot of their stories are interesting, but it makes it so there's such a press for time in order to actually develop Yuri and Victor, and I
Right.
guess ostensibly Yurio, who's supposed to be in the one of the main characters but doesn't get much attention until the end. That it
Right.
really doesn't feel like any of them except maybe Yuri.
Yeah, and that's really the problem is that they needed to learn to cut some of these characters like you
Some
know
Gil, yeah.
yeah, Sungil honestly, like I thought he had an interesting story, but he wasn't really necessary. Michelle,
Yeah.
the Italian skater who's obsessed with his sister,
And same with
who
Emil.
yeah, Emil, or I mean the big one I'm thinking of actually just showed up in the last two episodes, Odebek.
Yeah, exactly. What did Odebek accomplish other than proving the fact that Yurio is capable of having a friend? Question mark.
Right. I mean, I had touched upon this a little bit before, which is how the series has this tension between the pure competition versus the expression of what they want of what the characters want to convey, because a lot of these people have very pure emotions that they want to express to the world. It doesn't really matter when they're trying to skate and win and keep going in the tournament.
Yeah.
And I think, for example, with Sungil, what they were trying to show is this is a guy who doesn't even care about his meaning. He's just trying to win. That will only get you so far. And I think Odebek was supposed to be the extreme version of. Because what Odebek did was he showed JJ, who we'll probably get into later, was the best character in the show,
Yep.
uh, how he showed AJ, or he reminded JJ that this wasn't about pure expression. There are real stakes at hand here.
Hmm.
And he showed JJ that,
Someone's out to get you.
yeah, essentially. But it's, you could have done that with any other character. We didn't really need to go into Odebek's history. You could have easily done that with Yurio.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
frankly, had they done that, they would have probably made Yurio a more interesting character.
Yeah. I mean, if they'd given him more time, that's the thing with Yurio is all the promotion was treating it like it was going to be about Yuri and Yurio. We call him Yurio because that's his nickname, but his name is Yuri, and that's the whole concept of the show is that there are these two skaters. They're both named Yuri, and they're competing with each other. But the Russian Yuri, otherwise known as Yurio, gets a lot less attention and a lot less development. So we know that he was mostly raised by his grandfather, that he doesn't have a real relationship with his parents, that he was training for figure skating from a young age. You can make some assumptions about that, that like maybe his family needs him to provide for him, maybe his grandfather depends on him being a successful figure skater or something, but you don't actually know because it never spells anything out for you about him, despite the fact that his name is in the title.
Yeah. I mean, he shares it with the other Yuri, but the whole idea seemed to be that there was going to be this dynamic between the two, and there kind of was,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of the message of the series, I think, was rivalry inspires passion,
Mm-hmm.
and with it there. And I think that was the whole idea of the series about this whole idea of competition versus pure expression was that they're actually not mutually exclusive
Mm-hmm.
because it's through competition that Yurio can finally accept the fact that it's okay for him to have this pure love for his grandfather, this man who raised him, and it's through competition that Yuri kind of comes to terms with his own love for Victor.
Right.
And is without that competition, without these two spurring each other on, they would have never come to those conclusions. And I really love that message. And how they try and portray that. Again, the problem is that they don't put in the work there to actually
Yeah.
establish these
It gets a little
characters.
lost in the noise.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Especially because, we have to spend about 10 minutes an episode watching these admittedly quite gorgeous figure skating sections. Like,
Exactly.
there's no denying.
Mm-hmm.
I am incredibly surprised to see how this series never really lost sight of its animation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's it's funny because on some level we have a slightly negative tone at the end here. Um, but
We
that's
really love this series,
Yeah,
though.
exactly. Like this show has a lot to recommend for itself. It is animated extremely well. The narrative is very quick and it's compelling. It's exciting television. Realistically, I would rather have a show that does too much too quickly than a show that doesn't know what to
Oh,
do with itself.
absolutely. I think the show was a little ambitious
Hmm.
for the time they had allotted. Not necessarily for the budget, but just for the amount of because this we've talked about this a lot in the past. This would have been an all-time classic, and I'm not even just talking about like just in the sports category. I think this would have been an all-time classic anime if they had gotten that 24 episode mark and actually
Right.
had time to establish a lot of these characters.
And I think if they well, and what we mean by that is if they had tried to tell this same story with an extra 6 or 12 episodes.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
And because really it goes really strong
hmm.
up through the first 10 episodes.
Yep.
But we feel really bad because the last two episodes really kind of put a damper on our experience.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is that this show gained a ton of momentum based one on the fact that it had a much more frank depiction of same-sex relationships than most any anime is willing to do.
Right.
Um, and it was also a mainstream hit. It was well animated. It had a lot of other things going for it that supported it. It was exciting. It was narratively, it was well written. The issue we have with the end was that it could have gone a million different ways, and I would have supported any way it chose to go if it was doing something interesting.
Right.
But what it chose to do was go for a just go right down the middle and make sure that by the end of the show all the characters were happy. There was no conflict. So at the end of the show we reveal that Victor has decided he's so inspired by Yuri's strong competition, the fact that Yuri unseated his world record, that Victor says, okay, I'm going to go back to skating. And we say, oh, wow, this is going to set them up so they're rivals now. No. Victor is also going to be Yuri's coach. So what it does is that it forces the narrative so that you get everything you possibly want. You get to see
Right.
them still have a close, caring relationship, but also skate together and against one another. So yes, fans, you do get everything you want, but and that's fine, but it's not daring to do anything.
Yeah, and that's really the problem is that even had they gone with the Victor chooses to do both, they could have highlighted the impending struggle that he knew he was that was coming for him.
Exactly. Like this is
Or
not going to go well. You
this
know,
is not going to go
could they
well,
give
or if
any
I want it to go
indication
well.
that
Oh,
this is
sorry.
any yeah, they could have given any indication that this is going to be anything other than beautiful, ideal, lovely, romantic. But they don't. Like it is there's nothing wrong with happy endings, but it
Right.
didn't feel like this one was earned. It felt like a cop out.
Yeah,
Um,
because they didn't really because one of the big things about the series is we talked about how figure skating also becomes something of a metaphor for their sexuality. Um, they don't want to acknowledge the fact that there's this whole sequence where Yuri tries to break things off with Victor by telling him he doesn't want him to be his coach anymore because he's going to be retiring soon.
yeah,
And so so the whole notion that Victor gets to be his coach and also his competitor basically means they get to still be in a relationship and Victor gets to compete. But I
exactly.
feel like they could have still made it work if they had just acknowledged that these two were, sexually attracted to one another.
Hmm. Yeah,
Because then you
and
could just say that they're a couple that also happens to compete against one another.
right, and I mean, to be fair to the show, it did everything but say that. Like
Yes.
it was very very frank, and um, the final scene over the credits where they have a couples skating routine. It's like
Right.
you can't be much more upfront about it. But on some level, it's like if you're gonna say everything, why not say everything, right?
Yeah.
And again, that's coming from someone who doesn't live in Japan, who doesn't know what what the creators were dealing with what they could and couldn't say. And ultimately, I'm still very appreciative of the fact that they did as much as they did because it's
Right.
very difficult and it's very uncommon for anyone to in anime to treat same-sex relationships as normal and appreciated by their peers and not grossing anybody out. Like that is a brave choice that the studio made.
Right.
It just felt like they at the end they could have done something interesting
They could have
and
taken
they
that step further.
right, and what they did instead was set up and maintain all the characters in a stable place so that you could start from scratch with season 2.
Right. Um, and kind of going along with what you were saying, a lot of what they do to achieve that sort of accepting feel, there's something that feels very modern about this anime that a lot of other series don't. Like, there's still something of this mentality in a lot of anime to, like, social media is there and people with cell phones and stuff like that, it's always there in the background, but it's not really an important part of the story, and it's not really like an important part of the characters' lives.
Yeah.
One of the things I really appreciate about this series is that it fully tackles the idea that social media influences all of these people. It allows them to express themselves. It allows them to kind of reach out to the world. It's kind of brought this world together.
Hmm.
I love the fact that the entire reason that Yuri or that Victor discovers Yuri in his routine is that his routine went viral. He wasn't there like on a chance visit like a lot of other animes would do. No, Yuri just happened to do a routine that got viral on YouTube, and that's what got Victor's attention. Or the fact that the way that Yurio tracks down Victor when he goes to Japan to see Yuri, he tracks him via social media. He sees all the different pictures he's taken and kind of deduces it from there.
Hmm.
There's something that feels like it understands how people live their lives and how they use the technology around them. And I find that there was something about that I found really refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it was an extremely well built world, right?
Right.
The setting was good. All the characters, I mean, the characters were well done. All of them were interesting. There were perhaps too many of them, but I didn't feel like any of them didn't have a story worth telling.
Right.
You know, um, I don't know. There's a lot of things that I really like about it, and honestly, I would recommend this because this may not be something that lives on through the generations. This but it is definitely something that's extremely relevant for new things that anime is doing right now. You
Right.
know, can we take a brief aside and talk about our favorite character?
Oh, you mean Jean-Jacques Leroy?
Yeah. All right. Do you want to give it a quick introduction to who Jean-Jacques Leroy is?
He is the Canadian skater who if I recall correctly, when we were making our predictions for the series, you were going to be disappointed that the series did not pay enough attention to him.
Yeah,
You were
exactly.
wrong about that.
Yeah, they paid a
And
pretty solid amount of attention to it.
and not only that, and thank goodness you were wrong with that because JJ JJ essentially he is such a presence
Mm-hmm.
in every scene he is because he is so intense and passionate. He lives for the idea that people love him.
Yeah.
He's he is a literal rock star on the rink.
Yep.
In, he dances to a routine that he wrote him about himself being the king of the world.
Yeah,
This
exactly.
is a man who was unbelievably cocky and arrogant.
Yeah, but what I love about it is that his arrogance doesn't feel like it's at the expense of anyone else.
Right.
He's not coming in there saying that anyone else is worse than him. He's just saying that he likes being the best.
Yeah.
That may sound like it's the same thing, but it doesn't feel like the same thing because he doesn't harbor resentment towards anyone. He just has a confidence that he's the king of ice skating and he's here to show it.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's kind of it's fun because he's sort of set up to be the villain, but he doesn't actually have a malicious intent for anyone. He's just there to be great. And so his little arc is fun because he does dominate the initial tournaments. He gets gold and he's coming in as the top ranked skater into the Grand Prix finale. And I don't know how well justified it is in episode 11 when he ends up having a really bad routine, because it kind of comes a little bit out of nowhere. But ultimately, I like the development where he actually has a bad routine for the first time in his life, and he realizes how hard it is to be great, and he comes back and he gets third place overall because even though he knows he might fail, he still wants to be great. He's had that taste of failure, but he can still see that he has the opportunity for greatness. And I love that little arc because a lot of the shortcomings that we had with Yuri and Victor was that not enough was said, right?
Right.
Somehow not enough was said, and we didn't really feel like we knew them fully, even at the end of the show. But with JJ, enough was said.
Yeah.
It was subtle, it was quick, it was precise, but it was all we needed to get enough of a feel for JJ to justify everything he did. And I love that, and I feel like if they had focused a little more of that energy on, especially on Yurio,
Right.
I think we'd be a little more comfortable with how it ended.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And just something I want to touch upon there too is what I really love about that development of his character is that he realizes that he's going to have to make good on these proclamations that he's made about
Mm,
himself. And he's terrified about the fact that he sort of one of the things that's tied to him winning the gold is that he sort of made this careless promise to his fiance that he would marry her, if he won.
mm-hmm.
And
When he won is what he said.
yeah, when he won. Sorry, no, you're correct. There's a very specific difference there.
Yeah.
And he starts to realize, I may not win this.
Yeah.
Is she still going to care about me? And that's a great way to also show how he's also realizing, is anybody going to care about me anymore once I lose? Like, once I stop being the greatest, will anybody still be behind me? And that's the satisfying thing about the part about his arc, is that he discovers, yes, these people just love him. Even when he fails, they accept the fact, you know what, you're a human. You're gonna mess up sometimes.
Yeah. I don't know. I think there's a lot to be said for JJ. Again, though, he wasn't supposed to be the character that we were enthusiastic about, and maybe we're just weirdos.
Right.
But that's just the show obviously made a few. It had a few issues when the character we're most excited about at the very end is the theoretical antagonist.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I think overall I'm very happy that I spent as much time as I did with Yuri on Ice. It was it's a well made show. It's a show that most people will enjoy watching. Simple
Right.
blanket statement. I watched it with my fiance, and she doesn't watch much anime, but she got really into this one, and that was fun. Though it's a good way of letting people see that anime is approachable and can be exciting and can be told in a narratively compelling way. Um, and I also am just like really proud of being able to see it accomplish as much as it did for
Right.
having a diverse representation in media, which is something that anime does not do a good job at.
Yeah.
Um,
And
no,
I,
go
I
ahead.
kind of just appreciate how, if nothing else, it's a very fresh series. It's a very modern take on a formula that's been very tried and true. It makes a very good companion piece to Haikyuu, which is probably one of the best, like, classic sports battle series. This feels like a very fresh version of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot that stands out about this show just visually too.
Yeah,
One thing that we've identified already is that if you watch it for nothing else, watch it for the animation because it's really a cut above. Um, the I'd say most episodes feature a significant figure skating portion. Probably half the episodes are devoted in the majority of the runtime is devoted to actual figure skating routines.
right.
That's what it does, and that's what it does really well. So if nothing else, it depicts something that does not get a depiction of this quality. Really, it's never figure skating and really artistic sports have never gotten the kind of depiction in anime that this gave it. So that's extremely unique. Um, I would say that a couple that stick out to me off the top of my head, of course, are the first time we saw JJ's short routine.
Of course.
That was the most exciting uh, routine I saw, I think, in this show, just because it was such a declaration of physical manifest superiority. It was impossible to ignore, and along with the music they paired with it, and the same goes with Pitchett. The first time we saw Pitchett do his routine for "Shall We Skate" was just
Yeah.
so one great song. I love that they made up their own musical just
Yeah,
for this
not even
show.
because I love listening to the full version of that. And you can hear like the parts where they actually wrote where they made a lead into the song. Like they actually wrote the dialogue that's supposed to
Yeah,
lead
yeah,
into the
yeah.
main song of this musical. And they even have like a little interlude where they write this fictional scene where this king is supposed to be learning to skate. And it's like, this is such a lavish series because you only hear this song twice in the series,
Mm-hmm.
and those are during both of Pitchett's short routines.
Yep.
Same goes for JJ. We touched about that before on this song that they wrote that he was supposed to have written about himself, and I love just how much detail that they're willing to put in, and how much just love and care into every single scene.
Yeah, I love a lot of things about this show, not the least of which how much the creators of the show love the show. It
Yeah.
is extremely evident that this is a work of
Um,
love, and they put their heart and soul into it, and it shows, and it's fun, and it's great.
I am going to say one other thing since we're talking about most memorable scenes. I will. I'm going to stand by the statement at least until something better comes along.
Okay.
This has maybe one of the all-time best first episodes of a sports series. That's a
Yes.
big
Yes.
claim.
Hard yes.
Yeah. No, that opening routine that Yuri does, the one that we've alluded to, is maybe one of the all-time great moments in a sports series
Yep.
where he performs this. It's like what I love about it is how brazenly arrogant it is.
Mm-hmm.
Which is this weird thing to say because this is in a way, this is kind of a very low key show. But what I love about it is that they spend 4 minutes just animating. There's almost no dialogue to this scene. It's just watching Yuri perform this routine, and then in conjunction, it's spliced with edits between Victor performing the same routine at the same time when he's at his own competition,
Right.
and and you get this really incredible sense that the world is changing.
Mm.
Um, and I just love the fact that they are bold enough to actually spend 4 minutes doing nothing but just show these two skaters and intercut them to just state to just give this impression to the viewer because this is the end of one person's generation and the beginning of a new one.
Yeah.
And it's just this beautiful sequence.
Yeah, the
Um
first episode got a lot. I mean, that spearheaded the hype that has lasted up until now because it's such a well told first episode. It establishes so much so well with these two characters that you really buy into the world immediately. And so, I mean, like I said, we didn't think that it's, quote unquote, stuck the landing. With how it chose to go a little safe and sort of pleasant with its
yeah,
conclusion. But that should not take away from the fact that this is an exceptional show that's well told and well written and well animated, and deserves to be widely enjoyed. And I think it earned all the credit it got,
right.
publicly. There's a lot of bad anime that get popular. This was not one of them.
Yes.
So do you think who would you recommend this show to, Matt?
I am assuming most boys love fans are already watching the show, so I'm not even gonna bother saying that. I think this is a show that is worth watching if you want to see, because I think anime gets a lot of bad rap for being a very it gets a lot of bad rap for a lot of artists from a lot of
Yeah.
artists and animators for being a very easy art form.
Yep.
And I think this show is a great argument to that claim. If you want to show somebody what an anime can do,
Visually.
and yeah, visually, this is a phenomenal show.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good recommendation. I think I would recommend it to someone who has maybe had a negative experience with anime or just like has a negative vibe from anime, and the only way you're going to get, traditionally we've had things like Cowboy Bebop or the Miyazaki movies. I think this is sort of in that same vein where it's so unlike, um, the lowest common denominator of anime, and
Right.
it works with the narrative style and also the visual style of a Western audience as well as a Japanese audience. That this is a great. I mean, a lot of diehard anime people love it, but I think if you're going to give it to someone randomly, it should be to someone who has a little experience or a negative impression of anime and use this
Yeah.
to surprise them.
Yeah.
And yeah, so at the end, I think we've recommended this highly. It is an imperfect show, but I love how much it aspires to do, and I think it deserves a lot of credit for that.
It's something of a it's it's not quite a flawed masterpiece, but it's almost a flawed masterpiece.
Okay, that's a lot of qualification, but I think we're on the same page.
Yeah. Cool beans. Well, thank you so much for joining me this week, of course, Matt.
Yeah,
I
it's my
always
pleasure
appreciate your
as
input.
always.
Fantastic. Hope we can get around to reviewing some more here soon. Most of the rest of the season is ending up. If you wouldn't mind, would you hit the credits?
It would be my pleasure.
Our logo design is by James Ratcliffe. The theme song is Understar by Shocking Lemon, covered and performed by Luke Bartka. You can follow KoshienCast on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and our email is koshiancast@gmail.com. Make sure to subscribe for weekly updates on the best and worst in sports anime, and until next time, keep training.